Hello and welcome back to the FinalWhistle.ie for episode 4 of the Rugby Show. And as always, we have an absolutely packed show here for you tonight. We'll start off with some reaction from the Connacht Schools final where Sligo Grammar beat Cláiste Ignad. We'll also have reaction from the Munster Schools Cup and the Ulster Cup final, as well as a preview with Ciaron Noble on the Leinster Schools semi-finals and the AIL. And later on the show, we'll be joined by Buccaneers Captain Evan Galvin. But like I said, first we'll start off with the Connacht Schools finals, where Sligo Grammar came from behind to defeat Cláiste Ignad by 15 points to 10. Cláiste Ignad took an early lead through Ben O'Malley, and Patrick Nash followed up with 5 points after that. But it was a second half to remember for Sligo, with John Joe Devine scoring the first try and Errol Norris finding a penalty just after that. And then with just over 2 minutes to go, Matthew Ryan drove over from close range to seal the win for Sligo in what was their 11th title in the Connacht Schools Cup. And then in the Munster Schools Senior Cup, Crescent College were crowned champions after a 26 points to 5 victory over PBC Cork. Tries from Brandon Nash, Jed O'Dwyer, Max Klein, and 11 points from the boot of Oscar Davey sealed the win for Crescent College. We have reaction from head coach Lee Nicholas.
Nervous at the start, but once you got into it, you really took your chances, particularly in the first half.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was always going to be the case. It's a cup final, the crowds were really loud. I couldn't actually believe it, how loud the crowd was on the sideline. So fair play to the lads, but huge opportunity for Prez in the first couple of minutes, going 40-50 yards after a handling error by us, but absolutely awesome recovery tackle by Jed, or 15, and to not only get him down but to also stop him and stop his momentum running at full speed was top class defending. Yeah.
Okay, 14-0 up at half time. You took your chances. What was the message at the half time then?
I suppose the message was the breeze had kind of died down at that stage, fortunately, because we were playing with it in the first half. So at half time we were kind of just saying, keep doing what we're doing, keep the ball in the hand, pick and choose our moments to put the ball in behind. And then when we did get the lead, I suppose it was more of a put the ball in behind now and keep doing that,
Okay, 19-7 they got it back to. Were you any bit worried at that stage if they got another try? But you got a try straight away really to put the game to bed.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't really worried in that it was against the run of play, and it was kind of our own error in that we messed up our own line out. So no, I wasn't worried, but frustrated but not worried. No, I always believed in the lads. I mean, if you've seen us in the semi-final and what they did in the last 3 minutes to come back and to win that game, we have huge confidence in this group. So yeah.
The semi-final qualifier win over them, did that give you a lot of confidence, or especially when you knew you were going to face them in the final?
It did. I suppose it gave the players confidence. We knew that there was still a huge task ahead of us. They're a really good team, and they're unbelievable coaches on the sideline as well, who I know too well. So we did know that they were going to be there waiting, and that they were going to be a lot better than they were in the first round. But I think we clicked here today, and that's what got us over the line, that we were firing on all cylinders, which I don't think we've been doing so far in this cup campaign. And I think that was the point of difference today for us.
Yeah, how happy were you as a coach that you get to the final? Not everything can go your way, of course, in the final, but you executed very well. Your kick chase early on was good. Maybe some of the lineouts didn't go your way, but in general, I think he executed the skills that you wanted to execute at the right times. As a coach, that must be very rewarding. Yeah,
our first try there, where we drew, we just straightened the line and played the ball through the hands, and Brandon got it in the corner. We were absolutely over the moon, because we do so much work on our skills and sitting down defenders, and we've been doing that all through lockdown and all through this year. So it's absolutely brilliant to see it come into play in a cup final and to actually work and get us a try.
It didn't seem, certainly from our vantage point, that there was much nerves within both sides really, but particularly your own side. How do you prepare at coming into this cauldron? And a lot of guys would never have even set foot in the pitch here before today, perhaps. How do you set them up for that game? And did you feel that they hit the ground running and you didn't let the occasion get to them?
Yeah, I suppose a couple of them would have played in Junior Cup. A number of them would have played in the Junior Cup here when they were underage for that. But other than that, I suppose it's the final, so we played 2 really big games so far, and we've also played the Limerick schools and big derbies, which have drawn big crowds. But in general, this crowd they're a very confident bunch and very laid back and relaxed until they do cross the whitewash, when they turn into different beasts, as you've seen around half time there today, when there's people flying through the air to make tackles, So, like I said, they're a laid back bunch, and it doesn't take much to keep them grounded and to keep them from getting worked up.
And finally, as a teacher and I suppose as a rugbyman, how do you get these guys that are obviously kind of finished the school programme now, how do you see them progressing in their future careers with clubs and maybe indeed with Munster in the future?
I mean, some of the guys who are finishing in sixth year this year, I've no doubt that some of them can go on and play professional rugby, and others will go on and play in the All-Ireland League, which isn't to a high standard as well with their clubs. So I think the most important thing about schools rugby, or finishing schools rugby, is that they stay involved. So whatever we need to do, or we have done, seeing those boys play rugby next year would be another huge bonus for us, you know.
Well, I think both sides have pretty much been tipped for this final.
We are now joined by our reporter, Adam McKendry. Adam, welcome to the Rugby Show.
Thanks very much, Luke. Thanks for having me.
And I suppose we have to start now with that big final tomorrow between Campbell College and Methodist College. Talk to me a bit about the sides' form up to the final.
Well, I think both sides have pretty much been tipped for this final from a long way out. I think this has been the intended final from the very beginning. And if you'd asked someone before the competition even began, these were the two teams that they were expecting to be in it. So not too much of a surprise that these are the sides that will be contesting it. But it's going to be a very good game, I think, because both sides are carrying very good form into this. Neither side have had any sort of shocking defeats since almost November. They've both been putting together very good runs against even a lot of the southern teams from Dublin. They've both played a lot of games against them, and they've both seen off some decent opposition as well. And then in the competition so far, they've both progressed pretty much as expected. And in the semi-finals, I think they both showed they are the two best teams, because Methody came up against obviously old rivals RBAI, and you always get a good game between those two. But Methody in the second half, they really proved that they were a step above their Belfast rivals. And Campbell then came through terrible conditions against Wallace High in the semi-final to win. So I think this really is the top two sides in Ulster coming up against each other, and we should see the best that Ulster Schools Rugby has to offer on deck tomorrow.
Definitely, and you briefly mentioned there about the semi-finals. Campbell College winning 28-6 over Wallace High. What kind of a game was that? Were Campbell College kind of in control for most of the game?
Yeah, it was a little bit closer than I think a lot of people would think based on that scoreline, purely because Wallace kept it tight sort of up until halftime. The conditions really were a leveler. You know, we'll go on and talk about the RBAI Methody game, which was played in beautiful conditions, and then the very next day we had a deluge of rain and wind as Campbell took on Wallace. But really, it was just Campbell controlled the conditions a lot better, and then their forwards took over, and that's what did it for them. You know, whenever you have conditions like that, you need your forwards to stand up, and Campbell, I think, really got that from the likes of Joe Hopes. Hooker Zach Solomons is a really good player. You got likes of Oliver McCauley, Flynn Longstaff in the back row. All of them had really good games, and those were the guys we were told about before the game even began, that they were going to be the danger men, and they all stepped up and had big games. And sometimes in schools rugby, that's what you really need. You need your big players to have a good game, and those guys really stepped up, and I think they'll be leaning on them heavily in the final as well.
Absolutely. And then moving on to Methodist against RBAI, and a 43-15 win. Very dominating performance from what I heard. Can you talk to me in depth about that, really? Again,
Funny enough, it was a game where it was very close at halftime, because Methody scored two quick tries, and you sort of thought, okay, here we go. This is gonna be how it will play out. But Inst really actually dominated up front for most of the game, and they put together two maul tries, one that went over, and then one where they went over just sort of first phase after that. And at that point, you kind of thought, well, goodness, Methody are actually in a bit of an arm wrestle here, because Inst were putting it up to them good and proper in the forwards. But then just in the second half, that Methody quality took over. And I think one of the big things that they got was a really, really good kicking performance from fullback Ben McFarlane. We were saying it at the game, like, that's probably the best kicking performance we have seen in a schools rugby game ever, because he was landing kicks right on the touchline from a long way out. He just kept the scoreboard ticking over, and in schools rugby, that's massive. If you can just keep putting points on the board, just keep for your mental, from the mental side of things, if you can keep just the scoreboard ticking over and pull away, it just really hammers away at the opposition's confidence. And I think that's what they did. And like in the centre, they've got two massive centres in Lorcan Hanratty and Captain Peter O'Hagan, two massive guys, really good ball carriers. It's actually set up really nicely for the final, because you have Campbell, a team who did so well in the forwards in their semi-final, and Methody, a team who did so well in the backs in their semi-final. And the thing is, both teams are probably going to want to dispel those sort of myths that they're only good in one area of the game. So you're probably going to see them have good games on the opposite side. You're probably going to see the Campbell backs have quite a good game and the Methody forwards have quite a good game. But it's very well poised after those last 4 games.
And obviously an all Belfast final, and it seems to be that way kind of with teams that were left even in the semi-final. Do you think there's a way for schools kind of around Ulster that aren't in Belfast to maybe up their game a little and to start contest for the Ulster Schools Senior Cup?
It does seem to be dominated by Belfast schools, and you have a lot of kids who will live outside Belfast who will start going to school in Belfast purely for the rugby, and it is a challenge. You have teams that will compete. You have the likes of Wallace, who got to the last 4. They've only won the competition once, and that was the year that the final was cancelled due to the pandemic. So they haven't actually won a final at Kingspan Stadium yet. But you have the likes of Ballymena, who do quite well. You have Ballyclare High, who have started to come onto the scene as well. Coleraine tend to have a decent year so far. Royal School Armagh were the other team in that final whenever Wallace played them in 2020 that ultimately didn't go ahead. I think there is a bit of a challenge for the schools outside of Belfast because they're not pulling from the same pool as the Belfast schools, and that obviously makes things tough because it's not like in professional rugby where if you're missing in certain areas, you can just go out and recruit and bring guys in. The issue is that if you don't have the players there, you've just got to hope that they develop as the years go on. So it is one of those things where I think schools coaches can look down the years and they can look and say, well, okay, we've got this, this, and this. You can look at medallion level and say, well, we've got these guys coming through. How do we maximize our potential here? But ultimately, you are a little bit hamstrung by the pool you've got, and the fact that if players feel they're good enough, that they might then go on and just go to the Belfast schools anyway. It is tough, but I think one of the big things about the Ulster Schools Cup is the schools outside Belfast do a great job at trying to bridge the gap. I went down to Dromore High just before they played their quarter-final. Dromore High are a team that weren't even in the Schools Cup proper until 2017, and they've already made the quarter-finals this year. So massive gains. They're putting a lot of emphasis into what they're doing there, into not just the senior team, but the teams coming up through, and they're taking them away on trips to South Africa. They're doing a lot of team bonding. They're making sure that it's not just we're focusing everything on our senior team. We're making sure that you're going to get a lot of coaching whenever you are coming up through the system. And I think that's just what schools have to do. That's how you're going to bridge the gap, is just by making sure that you're saying to them, we will give you the chances to impress, and if you do, we could have a team that goes far in the competition. It's not always going to be dominated by Belfast schools. There are going to be teams that will have those purple patches. They'll have those years that are very good. Like, as I mentioned, Wallace's year, whenever the pandemic was cancelled, you had Nathan Doak, who's now obviously in the Ulster senior setup. You have Ben Carson, centre in the Ulster Academy, and Ruben Crothers, who's captain of the Ireland under-20s. So you have those years where you have those guys. It's just about maximising those years. But the unfortunate truth is, I think for most years, you're going to have the Belfast schools not necessarily dominating, but you're going to have most of them thereabouts.
And then finally, Adam, before I let you go, if you're backing any side now for tomorrow's final, who would you be going with and why?
Oh, great question. Look, as I said before, the boot of Ben McFarlane is massive for Methody, just to keep that scoreboard ticking over. Even if they can get a couple of early penalties just to, lay down a marker, McFarlane's going to kick them, and that just puts that doubt into Campbell's mind that you can't give away penalties in kicking range, when maybe in other games you can afford to give away a penalty knowing that they're not going to kick it. They're just going to stick it to the corner, and you back your defence to keep them out. But look, Campbell, I think a lot of people will look at having only beaten Wallace by 22 points, compared to Methody's win in the semi-final, and they'll probably think they weren't as impressive. But they had to go through a lot to see off what was a very good Wallace team. And whenever you have that kind of confidence behind you, and they're going to bring a massive support to Kingspan Stadium for the final as well, I think they're going to be right on it. Ultimately, I think the weather's not supposed to be great in the lead up to the game, but it's supposed to be good during the game. It'll probably be more of a backs game, which will suit Campbell. But it just depends if they can get that forward dominance, which I'm not sure they will get against Methody, who are wanting to bounce back after what they put up in the semi-final against Inst. So I think Methody are just slight favourites, but it really is too close to call.
Thanks so much, Adam, for that, and we'll have to get you on next week to see if your prediction has come true anyway. So thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
We are now joined by our AIL expert and Leinster Schools Senior Cup expert, Ciaron Noble. Ciaron, welcome back to the show.
You've given me another expert role now. You're calling me an expert.
So, well, we have to really start, and you were one man at the start who did predict these four teams going very far, and the Leinster Schools Senior Cup semi-final draw with Gonzaga facing Mary's next week and Blackrock facing Newbridge. So we'll start off a bit maybe with Gonzaga and Mary's. How impressed have you been with their performances?
Well, I said that Mary's would beat Kilkenny, but to be honest, that was just a stab in the dark. I didn't see anything from Mary's prior to that, and I did see Kilkenny against Bray, so I was kind of thinking to myself, Mary's, I'm just going to go for them, because I've heard, even though I didn't see them play, I've heard good things about them, so I kind of just went for them. But I was very impressed with Kilkenny, to be honest. I would have said it was the most competitive quarterfinal out of the four. I think either team could have won. I think the wind was playing a big factor, and Mary's kind of just were the better team in the second half and took their chances. It's hard to know really between Mary's and Gonzaga who's gonna. I think either team can win that game and either team can get into the final. But I think Gonzaga are very, very good. They're very, very well drilled, and the way they beat Wesley, I wasn't surprised at all, to be honest. I know Wesley had that big win against Ross Gray, and it was probably the shock of the round, to be fair. And, people were saying, how far could they go? But I kind of knew Gonzaga would just kind of grind them down. And, their fullback, McLaughlin, a fantastic player. Their out-half, McMahon, fantastic player. In the second row, Thomas Murphy is another guy who's really impressed me for Gonzaga. So I think if I was to pick a team, it would be Gonzaga, because I think they're a team that have really been on a steady rise for the last 3-4 years. They've put in a lot of work in the juniors and the seniors. And they're doing really good things. And it's funny, 3 of the 4 teams that are in the Senior Cup semi-final phase are the last 4. If you rewind 3 years and look at the same setup, Junior Cup, when they were all Junior Cup. So Gonzaga were in the semi-final then, Newbridge were in the semi-final then, and Rock were in the semi-final then. The only team that aren't in the senior semi-final that were in the junior semi-final 3 years ago are Michaels. But Michaels would have been there if they didn't play Rock in the first round. They would have been there. So it's funny, it does translate. You can't kind of predict from the way the Junior Cup goes how the Senior Cup might go. So yeah, I think therefore it's an interesting semi-final lineup. I think Mary's and Gonzaga will be a close game, and it could be a bounce of a ball that kind of separates the two sides. And
definitely. And I think with that Gonzaga side, one thing that I noticed from watching the game was how strong their replacements were. And you saw Oisin Murray and Thomas Noonan come off the bench and to score tries. I think that strength and depth is something that is really maybe overlooked at these stages of games. And I think if you're able to bring on a new front row that's just as strong as your starting front row with maybe 20 minutes to go, it's a huge thing. And I suppose that could be something that they might have on Mary's. Mary's, obviously, if you do 1 to 15, they do match up very well with Gonzaga. but I feel the strength of Gonzaga off the bench and at the huge panel could really go in their favour.
Also with Gonzaga, I think the league system has really benefited them. Marys aren't involved in the league system because they're supposedly in the top 6. But I think Gonzaga, they've had tough tests in the league. Like, I was there when they beat Pres Bray last play of the game in the semi-final. They had a tough final against Kilkenny. Kilkenny actually beat them in the early stages of the league. So, like, that league process, it toughens you up a bit come the cup. Whereas Marys, they would only been really playing friendlies. And people can say they took those friendlies really serious, but, it's different when you're actually playing for something. So I think Gonzaga might have that competitive edge as well.
Absolutely. And one other thing I noticed from the Marys Kilkenny game, obviously a very strong second half from Marys. There were 6 points down at half time. But the form of Dara Gilbyrne at out half, he's an out half that a lot of people have looked at to maybe be a future Leinster star. But he did have a difficult day with the ball on the tee. And I think Ciaran Maloney's decision to take him off kicking duties midway through that second half and put Conor Tracy on, who would only actually come off the bench in that first half, but he was a man who showed real nerves of steel, and the fact that you can have a couple of players that can stand up to the plate and to be slotting over penalties and conversions at that stage in the game, it's huge as well, isn't it?
Well, in schools, I think it's really important to have a few lads that, you can rely on, not just one. I think sometimes you can get caught up in some teams, maybe the smaller schools, where there's one lad that is really good, that's played, is a Leinster representative, an Ireland representative, and you rely on him so much that he's only normal like these lads. So, they can have a bad game. But as you said, Marys were able to bring on somebody who was able to take the pressure off a bit, and that's what you need. Schools need to have a full squad rather than just one or two lads.
100%. And I remember when we were speaking a couple of weeks ago, two sides that you did single out for their real strength, and it was Blackrock and Newbridge, and the two of them meet then next week. How do you see this one playing out? I know Newbridge are a side that are maybe a bit close to your heart sometimes. You know them well.
Yeah, well, my dad went to Newbridge, so I suppose I'm always watching how Newbridge are doing. But to be honest with you, my dad won't like this, or any of my uncles, but I saw him, Blackrock, play Newbridge in that Junior Cup semi-final 3 years ago, and Blackrock won something like 50-something 7. Like, it was pretty. Blackrock went to town on them. And I can't see it being any different, to be honest. I just think, okay, Paddy Taylor wasn't there that day. He was only in first year. Todd Lawler wasn't there that day. Lucas Berkey was there, and then he went on to skip TY, so he's not in the school anymore. I just think Newbridge, everything would have to go right for them, and everything would have to go wrong for Blackrock, to be honest. Blackrock, that team is probably, I talked a lot about Michaels 2 years ago and the team they had, the lads they had, Chris Cosgrave and all those guys, and they were being called the dream team of St. Michael's. Now, they actually did end up losing in the semi-final, so I was proven wrong. Newbridge beat them. But I do think this Blackrock team is just unbelievable. The front row, the two McCarthys, fantastic players that you'll definitely see play for Leinster and maybe even Ireland in the future. You've got Quirk at out half, who's very good. Cooney in the centre, Kurtzinger, all these guys, Quinn on the wing, they're just a full package. And I just think something really, really has to go wrong if they're not going to win the cup this year. And I know that's really boring. People always say, everyone tips Rock, and if you don't tip Rock, you tip Michaels. But that's just the way I see it. I genuinely don't think anybody can kind of upset them, to be honest. I might be wrong, and I know you're hoping for some sort of team to upset the apple cart a bit, but I just think Rock are just so good this year. I can't see anybody beating them. But the big thing for Newbridge, the big thing for them is Paddy Taylor went off with a bad concussion in the last game, so he got bad head knock. So, and when he went off the pitch, they didn't score any more points, I don't think. I think when he went off, they didn't score any points in the second half anyway. And they looked in real trouble. They looked to be in real trouble in the second half. Offensively, defensively, they were very good. The two back rows they have in Ciaron Kelly and McGrory, is it, or number 7? Yeah. They have two fantastic players in defense, but in attack they looked a bit confused, and they didn't really know where they were going. Lawler was gone off, and Taylor was gone off. So I think if they have any chance at all, those guys have to be playing, especially Taylor. Like, Taylor is only 16, I think he's in TY. So he's a guy that they're going to rely on for the next 3 years. But for Newbridge, I don't think they're really, even if they lose, obviously they're not going to openly say we want to lose this game. But even if they lose, I think they're really focused on the next 2 years. Like not this year, but I think, next year and the year after that, you've got Ty Brophy for another year. You've got Paddy Taylor. You've got Mangan on the wing, who has the 3 years as well. You've got Bowen, the prop, and has 3 years. He's a very good player. So they're building for the future. And I really think in the next 2 years, they can really tackle, the Senior Cup. I just think this year is maybe a year too early for them. And I really don't see anybody stopping Rock, to be honest. Sorry to be boring, but I just can't see it, to be honest.
Well, we'll have a fair idea of one of the teams that are through to the final anyway by this time next week. And moving on then to the AIL, obviously no fixtures. There is a 2-week break at the moment, but we will go back to the last fixture on the 5th of March. And I suppose Clontarf in Division 1A, a very narrow win over Terenure, but they remain 12 points clear at the top. Yeah,
they're very good. I seen them a couple of weeks ago against Lansdowne, and they're just very composed. You've got guys like Alex Soroka, who are part of the Leinster team, Leinster Academy in the back row, fantastic player. You've got somebody like Matt Darcy in the centre, who's been in Clontarf for years and years. And you'd expect, he's probably, I don't know what age he is, but he's probably getting on, and you'd expect him to be slowing down a little, but he's definitely not. Like, he was outstanding against Lansdowne. And I think Clontarf showed that there was a bit of a gulf between them and Lansdowne, to be honest. In that game in the second half, Clontarf just looked so much better than Lansdowne in so many different facets of the game. So I think, Clontarf are the favourites to go on and win the AIL now. Obviously, anything can happen in the playoffs. I wouldn't rule out Lansdowne, but they've had a few tough weeks. They lost that game against Clontarf, and then they lost against Young Munster. So Young Munster have done the home and away double on them this year. So they've done. Young Munster have done really well, but the most interesting thing in that playoff kind of battle is 4th place. You've got Cork Con. I think they're 47, I think maybe they're on. And then you've got Young Munster, who are in 5th, who are on 44. And then you've got Trinity, who, to be fair, had a massive win against Cork Con the last day. They're on 39. But Young Munster and Cork Con actually play each other in round 17, I think. And that's a massive game. If Young Munster can beat them, I think Young Munster will have home advantage. And if Young Munster can beat them, that might get them into the playoffs. Whereas Trinity need Young Munster to lose, and they need Cork Con to lose a couple of times for them to get in the top 4. Hope isn't all lost for them, but there's still a possibility. I think, Lansdowne are pretty much through to the top 4. Clontarf definitely are. And I think Terenure are pretty much there too, to be honest. But I think the big thing for Terenure now is in their the 3 games they lost up until they went on the big 10-game winning streak. The 3 games they lost were Clontarf, Lansdowne, and Young Munster. So they lost to Clontarf the last day out by 1 point, and now they have Young Munster, and I think then they have Lansdowne. And I think they need to win those 2 games just for their own mental state of mind, just to know that they beat those teams. I think it's really important because they might end up playing one of them or both of them in the playoffs. So I think they really need to just beat one of those teams, just to give them a bit of confidence. I think in terms of relegation, I think you're probably looking at, I said this weeks ago, but it's between UCC and Ballyhinch. I think UCD are all right, Garryowen are all right. So I think that's what you're looking at there. And then, in terms of how the playoffs are going to go, you don't really know. Like, playoffs is like, you may as well have a clean slate in a lot of ways. But I think Clontarf will be the favourites going in. Young Munster can do a lot of things as well if they're in there, like Patrick Campbell, who's with Ireland under-20s, once they get him back. And Conor Hayes is another guy. I think he's been injured the last while. And if they get him back, that would really help them. I haven't seen much of Cork Con, but Cork Con are always good come the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
It most surely will. And then moving on to Division 1B, Wesley 12 clear at the top with Highfield in 2nd place, and Shannon have overtaken Naas into 3rd place after their win over Old Belvedere. And I suppose Old Wesley, big win over Naas last time out, 29 points to 19. With that top 4 there, Naas are 4 points ahead of St. Mary's, who are in 5th. Do you kind of see that maybe staying as it is, or do you think Mary's or maybe even City of Armagh can make a late burst for that top 4 spot?
The thing about St. Mary's is they were actually in the top 3 up until a few weeks ago. I think they've lost 3 games on the bounce. They lost against Old Belvedere, they lost against Highfield, and then they lost against City of Armagh. So they're in a real rut, I think, and it's the wrong time. It's the wrong time of the season to be in a rut, And I think Shannon are a team that are the opposite. I think they're becoming really, really good at the right time of the year, because I was commentating with Justin Old Belvedere versus Shannon a couple of weeks ago, and Shannon were just really good in the second half, and they looked, like I said on commentary at the start of the game, that I thought Old Wesley were going to win 1B comfortable enough, like the way things were going. But then after the game, after I saw Shannon, I was like, geez, Shannon looked like they could, really give Old Wesley a go, and they actually play each other in round 18. But I said to Justin, I don't know how much they'll get. They might be looking at each other for the playoffs, so I don't know how much they'll give away in that game. They might keep their cards close to their chest. But actually, the captain for Shannon, who was very, very good, you had him on the program already, Lee Nicholas. He was excellent for Shannon the last day against Old Belvedere, and then you've got Kelvin Brown in the back row as well. Jake Flannery was playing out half that day for Shannon. Brilliant player. He's with Munster, and I think he was my man of the match, to be honest. When those guys come back to club level, if they've been in the provinces, you can tell straight away, because they're just that little bit above the rest, and he really turned it on in the second half, which really helped Shannon. So they'll be hoping he'll be around for the next few weeks.
Definitely, and I agree with a lot of what you were saying there. I think there will be a lot of mind games maybe to be played in them final couple of games, like you're saying, Shannon meeting it up against Old Wesley. And I saw it with the women's round robin, and you can't really expect sides to be putting out their full strength teams, especially when they have their spot guaranteed. And I suppose moving on then to Division 2A, quite a strange weekend there last time out, with 3 of the top 4 losing. Obviously Queen's University, the only ones who did get a win over Barn Hall. And Queen's University sitting 14 clear of Cashel in second place. And it was a shock loss for Cashel, who lost to last place Rainy Old Boys by 24 points to 21. Buccaneers sitting in third place, but do have 2 losses on the bounce. And Ballymena then sitting in fourth, who are 6 points clear of Barn Hall in fifth. And it's quite similar to Division 1B, with that 6 points separating fifth and fourth place. How do you see that playing out? I know there's still quite a few big games to go.
Yeah, well, I don't get to see much of 2A, but, from what I read and what I see the odd time, Queen's University seem to be kind of like the Wesley of 2A. They seem pretty comfortable, but we've talked about it numerous times. It doesn't really matter if you're class for the 18 rounds in the normal season. You have to do it in the playoffs. Barn Hall are a team that have really, improved over the years, and it would be really good for them if they could make the playoff places. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there. 2B is another division where a lot of things are happening. Belfast Harlequins seem to be a team where they're really coming good at the right time of the season. They beat Greystones a few weeks back, and since that, they've really, improved with every game. They look really good.
Beat Blackrock
as well.
And Harlequins bet them by 3 points. And obviously, we had Christian Bennison on the program a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying the hunger and the determination in the squad to get back up to the higher divisions, which they should be in. He was like, we're a Division 1B club. We've been there before. And I think that hunger, when you have someone like that driving it through the club, it really goes far. And I suppose Greystones had a little bit of a blip, 2 games that they lost in a row, but they get back to winning ways against Ballina last time out. But a huge game at the top of the table there. They take on Corinthians next. How do you see that one playing out? Corinthians been very impressive this year as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, because I said when I started doing these podcasts that I've seen Greystones over the years. They do really well in the regular season, but sometimes when it comes to the serious stuff, they can sometimes fade away. So I know I said teams aren't going to show much, but I think Greystones are going to have to go out just for a bit of confidence. They're going to have to go out and prove that they can beat these guys, because I think they might end up facing them in the AIL final in 2B. Maybe not, maybe they will, but they need to beat them like before the playoffs, just to give them that bit of confidence. And in the dressing room, the coach can say to them in the semi-final or the final, like, we've beaten these guys only a couple of weeks ago. So that kind of gives them that motivation that they can do it. And I think Greystones are a team that kind of need that that sort of motivation and buzz. And they've had a couple of injuries too in the last few weeks. Mark Myler took a bad he got smashed in a tackle, to be honest, and I think he broke his arm or something. I was talking to him a few weeks ago. It was in the Belfast Harlequins game, and there was a few other lads that went off that day. I think Dan Mannion went off. So injuries plays its part as well. So it'll be interesting to see who's available for them come the business end of the season. Personally, being from Wicklow, I'd love to see Greystones go up. But it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Definitely. And then finally moving on to Division 2C, and Enniscorthy 9 points clear at the top ahead of Skerries. And I think that top four is really something that is quite settled. Middleton are sitting 10 points behind Tullamore, but they do face Bangor next, and you never know, a win for Middleton, I should say. And maybe if Tullamore fails to pick up points, it could really change it up a bit, and it's heading into that nervy stage of the season.
Yeah, I spoke about Enniscorthy a couple of times as well, and I think if they could go and win 2C and get promoted to 2B, I think it would give so much motivation to teams like Bective that look like they're challenging to go back up to the AIL now. I think they have to play like a round robin competition or something. But even smaller clubs like, I don't know, Sea Point, Wicklow, Monkstown, like seeing Enniscorthy go up to 2B would give them so much motivation, because only 2 or 3 years ago, Enniscorthy were in Leinster League 1A and they were winning the Town's Cup. So I think just showing that the AIL gap and that gap isn't so big, I think it would really give teams a lot to, hope for. So I think I'd love to see Enniscorthy win the league, to be honest. I think it would be great. And they look like a really good team, to be fair. Ever since they won that Town's Cup and they won the Leinster League 1A a couple of years ago, they've really went from strength to strength.
Definitely. And Ciaron, it's been a pleasure as always. So thank you very much. And we'll have to get you back on next week, see how your predictions are coming through for the Leinster Schools Cup.
Hopefully they're all good again.
And we are now joined by Buccaneers Captain Evan Galvin. Evan, welcome to the Rugby Show.
How are you doing? Thanks for having me on.
And I suppose, first of all, you've had a decent season so far, but how can you sum up the AIL campaign?
I suppose it's been topsy-turvy for us now. We started off pretty well, then went through a bit of a slump there on Christmas time. We had some tough fixtures, got the show back on the road, and then we had 2 recent losses. So we're still in contention. We're in the top 4 at the moment, so that's where we hope to be at the end of the season. So we just need to get back to winning ways and hopefully see out the end of the season, then progress on to them playoffs is our aim.
Definitely, and you briefly mentioned it there, them couple of losses to Crescent and UL Bohemians. And I suppose when you're in the dressing room or training sessions, is there anything different you do when you're maybe in a bad slump of form, or how do you try to get the show back on the road?
I think we just have to stick to what our process is and what we do in training. I feel like we were very close in them games. It was just maybe a bit off, 3% off. Maybe it was a mindset thing, or I don't know if a few decisions go your way. I don't think you can have a knee-jerk reaction to these things. We just got to stick to our process, and hopefully our training will go fruition onto the pitch, and we get back to winning ways. We have actually the Connacht Cup final tomorrow on Paddy's Day, so we're aiming to get a bit of silverware there and get a bit of buzz back in the squad, and then lead into the last AIL game. So that's our aim at the moment.
Definitely. And how important is that game then tomorrow, even for confidence, I suppose, to end in that AIL season strongly?
Yeah, it's a huge day for the club. It's we train all year, and it's not often you get into a final and a chance to win some silverware. So our focus is clearly on that. We haven't even thought about the AIL game. So I'm playing Ballina tomorrow. It'll be a tough fixture, and in the sports ground here in Galway. So that's our main focus now, and it'll be great to win a trophy. So if we win that, we'll hopefully lead into a good season. But that's the main focus at the moment.
100%. And if I can kind of jog your memory back to the start of the season, as a group, do you really put goals together that you want to achieve, or even personal goals for yourself at the start of the season? What were you aiming for?
Well, I feel like we feel like Buccaneers belong in 1B, and that was our main aim, and it is our aim to get back up to 1B and maybe even progress on to 1A where we were a couple of years ago. So okay, I think a lot of the clubs in our division are aiming to get back up there, or aim for promotion. So it's highly contested, but we didn't set out any specific goals, but we just go game by game and stick to that. We knew this year it's going to be even more difficult because the winner of the league doesn't go directly up in its top 4 process. So it's a long season. You can go through different periods of form, and it's just get to that top 4 at the end of the year, and then have a crack at it. So we know where we are. It's tough. There's tough teams in our division, and we're in a bad run of form at the moment, but we are still in the top 4, and that's our aim to get there. And then when they come to that playoffs, we'll be ready. Hopefully, if we get there.
And like you said there, it's a hugely competitive league that you're in with the likes of Cashel, Queen's University, and I suppose from all the games you've played in yourself, is there a toughest opposition that you've come up against?
I think it's obvious that the Queens are probably the toughest opposition. They're sitting top of the table and our favourites to go up. But then when it comes to when we've played them twice, I don't think the scoreline might have flattered them, and especially in our home fixture. But I think we're not far off. So you can't fear these things. But Queens are a good side. Cashel are a good side. We had them the first game of the season, so it's a long time ago since we played them, and we had them the last game of the season again. So it's hard to put I suppose any merit to when we played them. So I think they've come a long way since then. And look, we've lost to teams in the last 2 weeks to teams below us. So I think everyone can beat everyone, as you said previously there, and with your previous person on that. Old Rainy had beaten Cashel the previous fixture, and they're bottom of the league, so they're fighting for their lives. So you can't take any game for granted. So Queens are sitting top, but I think everyone's in the hunt to go for promotion, and everyone's aiming for that, or to stay in the league. As the teams at the bottom are trying to fight to stay in the league. So it's highly competitive.
And I was looking only earlier on at I suppose, tables from the 2019-20 season, and Buccaneers are sitting in 8th place. And kind of what has changed since then? Is it kind of mentality or new personnel, or what really is the difference since that last campaign?
We've got a very young squad. I feel like we come off the back of a few relegations. So we were in 1A, and then we got relegated down to 1B, and we back to back down to 2A. So I suppose confidence around the squad probably wasn't at the highest level. We had a lot of older personnel kind of left the squad, so it's a younger squad. And I suppose we were just feeling the way out. We didn't have a great season. I think we still had a game in hand in that division, in that league, and we still probably would have been up around 5th if we won that game or something like that. So we weren't far off. But no, it is a young squad, and it's all about building confidence. I think a run of form in the AL is key. If you can get a run of form together and confidence, it's you can feel like you can beat anyone. So this year I think we've got a great group. Lads are buying into it, and look, we've got decent results so far. We haven't won every game. We haven't been happy with our performances, but I think that lads are willing to work hard on the training field, and hopefully it'll get us where we want to be at the end of the year.
And like you said there, you're definitely a side that has shown everyone that you maybe do belong in them higher divisions at stages in a couple of games. And you did mention there about training, and what things do you really focus on as a group in training? Do you kind of look to see who you're playing at the weekend, how they kind of play, and work a bit around that, or do you really just focus on your own game plan?
There's a bit of both. I suppose when it comes to the forward orientation, we do definitely look at the opposition lineouts or any plays they have, or and then defensively we kind of look at where they attack, so we can focus on, I suppose, fine tuning our defensive structure, because sometimes you can fall off that, or just refreshing people's brains. But no, our main focus is always on ourselves, because we feel like if we play to our potential, we can challenge any side in the league. So I suppose when it comes to, especially off the back 2 losses, you kind of just have to refocus on your own skill set and re-emphasize that what we're doing is the right thing, and it's just silly mistakes, or it's just decision making that's letting us down. So it's just improving our skill set and making sure we stick to the process that we have in defence and attack. And then if we execute that on the pitch, we'll get the results, we'll get a reward. So it's just kind of putting that home in people's brains or people's heads that that's the right thing. This is the process, and stick to it, and we'll get rewards on the field.
And Evan, then finally, as kind of I think to finish on, when we have players on the show, we like to do maybe a few quick fire questions. So I'm just going to ask you a few things maybe about your teammates, and the first person that comes to your head, I'll just get you to shoot out.
Right.
So if I asked you who the best passer you've played with is, who would you say to me?
Graham Lynch.
Best kicker.
I've ever played with Luke Hartley.
Right. Best tackler.
Roy Maloney.
And then maybe best rugby IQ, someone who's always one step ahead of the play.
My brother Fergus Galvin.
Best leader.
I suppose our current coach, Cola Kirpate.
And then I suppose maybe when you were a younger lad going into the side, who was the biggest influence on you when you first kind of went into senior rugby?
I suppose our current coach, actually, now that I mentioned Colo, he was our number 8 when I first came into the squad, and I was a young wiry back row. So he was coming to the end of his career, and I was kind of starting off. So kind of took it under the wing, and kind of, I suppose, we got a good relationship from then to now. So I'd say him as well. Like, a bit different game plans, different abilities. Now he's a big ball carrier number 8, or I'm more of just a workhorse on the field. So, but I'd say just he took under the wing and kind of show you the ropes, or if you make a mistake, which will have you a tap on the shoulder and on to the next one,
And I suppose how important is that? You did mention earlier as well, with younger lads coming into the squad. How important is it to have that good balance between the experience and the youth?
It's key. We've got a few wily old lads in the squad as well. Martin Staunton is one of the lads in the squad. I think he's hitting 40 now. He's mid-30s anyway. And then we've got younger lads who are just out of school. So it's important, It's you kind of find common ground in the change room. Some lads are very young, you're thinking, geez, I'm that old. I'm only mid-20s now. You feel like, geez, I'm that old. But no, it is important, because like you need to have endurance of youth, and then a bit of experience as well, because if you're not going to we're not going to win every game if you don't have a few old heads there just to steady the ship. So yeah, I feel like we've got a good balance, and hopefully it'll bring us back on the right course now at the end of the season.
100%. And Evan, all the best for the season, and thanks so much for joining us now tonight.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me on.
Cheers. So I'm afraid that is all that we have time for tonight, but make sure to tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m, where we'll be joined by Ciaron Noble to look at all of the Leinster Senior Schools Cup, and we'll also be joined by Lansdowne out half Peter Hasty. Thanks very much.